The story begins in a world full of a special type of power called the Runecraft. A few chosen people were born with this unfair otherworldly strength, and they became the rulers of this world. The ancient people praised Runecraft as a divine blessing sent, or a miracle which was sent from the heavens. However, among these countless blessings, there existed one that was different from the rest, and came to be known as the cursed Asura rune. The scene then shifts to a boy named Van who is covered in injuries and arrows stabbed through him as he desperately tries to run from a group of thugs. The thugs eventually leave him in miserable condition and shout at him to get lost and never dare to show his face to them again. Our hero keeps running forward, struggling for air with each step until he finally collapses in the snow. Ever since humanity was blessed with runecraft, those unfortunate enough to bear this rune carried a terrible fate, and this time poor Van is the one who has to suffer this fate. Just as he is about to lose consciousness, a group of kind people approaches and immediately panics over the extent of his injuries. His eyes begin to close, and an old guy standing in front of him quickly orders two girls to use their magic, and the two instantly start to pour green mana into the boy. Ever since that incident, 7 long years pass by, and a group of villagers is scolding a gang of thugs for disturbing them, as there is no way that they would be keeping someone with the cursed rune. The thugs finally admit defeat and leave the old folks alone before heading back to their employer. They inform the shady hooded man that they searched everywhere, yet they could not even find a single rune caster, much less one with the cursed Asura rune. The shady man then points a greasy finger at the bald thug and commands him to come forward. The thug does as he's told, but then suddenly gets stabbed out of nowhere while the other guy totally freaks out. As the body drops to the ground, the hooded figure rises and remarks that there is no way these low lives without mana could possibly find his target. The shady man then raises his hand and claims that unlike them, he can smell the ruin of that Asura rune from far away. Meanwhile, when the thugs finally leave the village, a voice calls out for Van and Linda to come out, and they appear from under a tree. Van apologizes to the old man for troubling him and the villagers, yet the old man does not appear to be worried at all. The old man's wife coddles the two and playfully teases them that they are always spending so much of their time down there. Linda jokes by saying that it is because Van actually likes it down there, but the boy explains that this is the place where they saved him back then, so naturally it has become his most favorite place in the entire village. The old man suddenly starts bullying the boy while the rest of them laugh and enjoy the show. The old man then turns to his wife and asks her about the wedding event, and she informs them that everything will start once the sun sets, which instantly puts them all in a very cheerful mood. After the sun finally sets, the marriage ceremony begins, and everyone gathers around a giant blazing fire. Van stands there looking all nervous about his big day, while Linda looks overjoyed like it's the best day of her life. The old man cheerfully announces the two as husband and wife, and urges them to say a few words. Linda does not hold back in the slightest, and proudly declares that she will keep all his tears, that he even forgets how to cry, and this makes the crowd go absolutely wild. When it's the boy's turn, he begins with his sob story and apologizes to everyone for making them deal with so much trouble like the thugs today. He says that he has gone through countless disasters at every single place he stopped, and that despair always followed him wherever he went. He could not even think of starting a new life anywhere, and if they had not saved him back then, he would have already died by now. He keeps his drama rolling and says that he does not even know if it is right for someone cursed like him to stay here. Just then, his gloomy speech gets cut short when Linda does everyone a favor and punches our hero with all her strength. She holds her fist high and says that if they had been scared of him, then they would have never bothered to save him in the first place. The girl goes on and says that ever since she met Van 7 years ago, she was indeed worried at the start. But when a real crisis struck the village, he stepped forward and protected them all. That was when everyone decided they would never worry about him again, ever again. And even if another disaster shows up, they will get through it together, just like they already did before. The other villagers also chime in loudly that they will protect their hero with their lives and tell him to loosen up already. Linda's mother then gently puts her hands on the couple's shoulder and tells them both to finish the ceremony now. The two then lock eyes as they openly declare that they love each other and seal it with some passionate French kiss. Meanwhile, a shady figure in the crowd suddenly transforms, revealing his true form as that lunatic shady guy from earlier, and jokes around that this lovely scene is going to make him cry. Just then, a giant explosion rocks the entire place. Soon after that, our boy slowly regains his consciousness. He stares at the mess of bodies scattered all around him and screams in shock. He begins backing away in panic as he slowly starts to lose his mind and wonders what the hell is even happening. He realizes he is the only survivor left out of everyone, and that even Linda's parents have been brutally murdered. Van cannot believe what is happening, and just then, the crazy guy from earlier reappears right behind him. A sudden attack slams our hero back as he bounces across the ground and lands against a tree, while the guy taunts him by saying he is scared the Asura rune might suddenly pop up. Pulling Linda by the hair, the creep slowly walks forward towards him, with his body radiating a dark and menacing aura. Van demands to know why the stranger is doing all of this, but the shady guy casually tells him he doesn't really need to worry about that. He explains that there is someone out there who is seriously interested in the Asura ruin and wants it entirely for themselves. He adds that survivors are always a pain to deal with, which is why he logically decided the best move was to blow everyone up. The crazy guy then teases our boy and wonders out loud if this makes the whole thing personal, but says that he is just following orders anyway, so Van really should not hold a grudge against him. The creep then activates his powers and informs our hero that this is a pocket prison created by his client, and inside it, time does not flow the same way as it does in the real world at all. He ends the conversation by saying he will let our hero out when the time feels right, so he should just be a good boy and wait, though he isn't too sure when that will be. The shady guy is still holding Linda up by the hair as she smiles at her hubby while he desperately struggles to break free from the trap and watches helplessly with tears streaming down his face. The poor fellow then gets trapped inside a giant cocoon and transported to another strange world, where he finds himself lying flat out on a raised stone platform. He wants to believe that not everything was connected to the rune, but then he wonders if his destiny was trapped from the very start. Even after all that happened, in the end, his powers only brought him misery and destruction, and ever since the day he was born, his entire fate was already set in stone. He wonders if accepting who he truly was a little earlier could have saved his entire family. In despair, he wishes things had gone differently this time, and that maybe he could have lived a normal life. The boy then comes to the conclusion that it was his own selfish wish that ended up massacring everyone around him. He pleads with the dead villagers never to forgive him for what he has done. Van lies there in complete shock and starts thinking about whether higher beings really exist, and if they do, then why would they allow such a cruel fate to even exist in the first place? He pushes the thought aside and instead focuses on the heavy pain, which makes him not even want to live anymore. He slowly closes his eyes and pleads with the voices to just let him die right now and finally end the suffering. His mind instantly begins to dream about his wife, who gently tells him that he is not to blame for what happened and that she will love him dearly forever. Van's eyes suddenly shoot open wide, and he starts to get up while talking to himself that this is entirely his fault. He scolds himself for clinging to such selfish thoughts and screams out loud that he has no right to ever end his life like that. He keeps screaming constantly that he is not going to die just yet, because there is still something very important that must be done. Van tells himself that revenge comes first before dying. The Asura rune legend passes through his mind that says the Asura rune always brings death and ruin, but he doesn't care anymore because there is nothing worse than this. Our boy then recalls what the creep said about someone else wanting his rune and swears he will definitely give that other guy a thorough taste of the rune he so desperately wants. The memories of his loved ones cross his mind, and he tells them to wait just a little longer until he can finally take revenge for them. But to do that, he first has to break out of this twisted prison. Just then, the creatures of the pocket dimension feed on his trauma and rush toward him to finish him off. But Van stands firm and vows to himself that it does not matter if it takes 10 years or 10,000. He will take revenge on the sick bastard who ruined his life. He then proceeds to farm the monsters as time slowly passes in that dimension. Even after over 600 years of non-stop fighting, our boy walks the path of Asura completely unaware of the terrifying power that was lying in wait for him. Just before 1,000 years pass in the prison dimension, even when he was buried deep in despair and suffering through endless agony, his resolve never weakened due to the burning desire for revenge in his heart. During his final trial, Van charges full speed at the massive monster before him, but the beast slams its hands together and crushes him in between like a fly. The giant clenches his fist tightly with blood dripping down from it, and then lets go as Van collapses to the ground, finally passing out from exhaustion after 1,000 years of pain. After passing out, he dreams of Linda sitting on a quiet hillside, where she tells him she wants to marry him so they can finally be a family. She says she wants children with him, and a warm home that Van can always return to happily. Linda then stands up, looks back at him with a smile, and tells him that it has always been her dream to live by his side. In that moment of weakness, however, Van snaps back to reality and the true power of his rune awakens at last. From his crushed body, a demon's energy begins to seep out and twist his form. Out of nowhere, a massive explosion erupts from which the Lord of Ruin, Asura, emerges. Although he is confused, Van quickly puts the newly unleashed power to use by summoning Helms and feels disappointed in himself, because if his true power was awakened that day, he wouldn't have to watch helplessly as his family got massacred right in front of his eyes. Fixing his gaze on the towering monster in front of him, he asks if that is truly the case before charging straight toward it without hesitation. A single strike from our hero sends the monster flying, smashing into the wall behind, but our boy is nowhere near finished as he leaps high into the air. With his hand charged full of energy, he unleashes his skill, Destruction Fist, and drives it straight into the giant's skull, and the devastating impact detonates into a giant explosion. The scene shifts into a forest where a pack of thugs corners a woman who swears that she has no money at all. The leader says he'll just take a few organs instead, only for Van to suddenly appear and cut him off mid-sentence. Our hero calmly asks what year it is, leaving the thug completely confused. The thug puts a hand on Van's head and tells him it's the year 1500, which sends our boy deep into thought, while another thug creeps up from behind ready to play whack-a-mole with his head. At the leader's signal, the lackey swings his mace down on Van's skull, yet our hero doesn't even flinch. Everyone there freezes in confusion, unable to process what just happened, while Van lifts his gaze and hits the thug with a death stare before snapping. In an instant, he starts tearing through the whole group like a college student against grade schoolers. With his new powers, he wipes the floor with every thug in sight except the mace guy, who is still stuck trying to process what just happened. Van then turns to him with a twisted smile and says he would like to ask him something. You see, the continent of Atun has many continents which were founded using the broken power of the runes since ancient times, but among them, one kingdom was declared the greatest of them all, called the Zoe Kingdom. They were powerful and dominated the continent for years due to their army of monsters. So he asks the thug again if the sorcerer in the picture he's holding is wearing the uniform of the royal family of the Zoe Kingdom. The thug replies that he couldn't possibly lie, implying that he's hanging upside down at the mercy of the protagonist. Our boy asks him for more details, and he quickly explains that 5 years ago, their bandit leader Degyal was contacted personally by the mercenary Kasorak, who made an offer and claimed it was from someone influential. The task was to find a special someone and burn a few villages for which they'd be paid a fat amount. In his defense, the thug explains that they never thought that the task was from the sorcerer of the Zoe Kingdom, so they immediately accepted it, and in no time, they burned down all the villages to ash. He then dives deep into the gory details of how they had to burn all the bodies, after which they got their pay from the purple-headed sorcerer. Van then asks if there was an orange-haired girl among the corpses, and the guy agrees that he vividly remembers she was burnt off with the rest. Not reading the room, he continues saying that he regretted her death since she would have fetched a greater price as a slave. But before he could finish that thought, our guy gives him some free plastic surgery with a solid punch. Later, somewhere in the Degyal Mountains, slaves are being hauled by bandits, and one of them comments that the children look fresh, but the other complains that they are too rebellious. And a third guy explains that livelier kids fetch a greater price, so it's a win-win situation. Suddenly, there is a knock at the gate, and the guard decides to take a peek and sees the soulless face of a fellow guard, and asks him why he took so long. But just as the unsuspecting guard opens the gate, he drops the head and a swift left hook sends the guard to Kingdom Come. The second guard tries to club our boy, but he blocks the strike and dodges all of his attacks, before he destroys him with another powerful punch. He then drags the body and the head in front of the other bandits, catching them off guard, and demands to meet their leader. However, right as the Gooners prepare to attack, their leader appears and tells them to step back. One of them tells Degyal that they can handle the situation, but he reminds them that they will get themselves killed since the person in front of them is a sorcerer as strong as him. He then asks our boy what he wants from him, and Van asks about the mercenary from the Zoe Kingdom. This catches the leader by surprise, and he questions what sort of info he wants. So our guy demands to know where Kasorak is if they want their lives to be spared. Degyal starts to explain, but just then, he charges a sucker punch in order to one-shot our guy and sends him flying. The bandit leader then notices our hero's murderous intent and accuses him of lying about sparing them. He declares that he will end the troublemaker today, and his body starts to transform into metal blades because he has a blade rune ability. At the same time, Van sighs because he never thought he would get a straight answer, so he looks up from the carnage and leaps towards the leader. He lands a blow to his gut and follows it up with a flurry of attacks. The leader grits his teeth and tries to fight back, but our hero dodges like it's Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, so the leader rolls into a vortex which spins and shoots flying blades. He states that he won't go easy on him any longer, and expects the blades to tear him apart, but Van moves through the storm completely unfazed, which makes the man wonder if he even feels pain. My guy laughs it off, saying "'tis but a scratch," and keeps moving through, causing the leader to break formation. He charges another attack and creates a huge fist of blades to end the fight, but our hero estimates it will only peel his skin at best and recalls his time in the void, which makes him call this pain too shallow as compared to the pocket dimension. He channels his anger and lets out a jab to counter the blade fist. But before his foe can react, a beam of energy bursts out from his fist, which vaporizes everything it comes into contact with. Finally, the fight is over, and our hero turns to the low-life bandits, saying he'll continue where he left off. By sunset, he has already gone through all of them, and the last survivor gives him info that Kasorak was in the Kingdom of Nordia at that time. The beaten and bruised bandit now asks to be spared like Van promised, but the hero lets him know he makes no promises. This makes the bandit angry, but he explains that it was a joke, and the bandit laughs with him. But before he realizes it, a single karate chop from Van is enough to end him, and he explains that the idea of sparing anyone is a joke. Later at night, he ponders he could have invaded the Zoe kingdom if he wanted, but since he doesn't consider the bandits trustworthy, he will just have to meet Kazarak by any means and confirm the hunch. He looks up at his creation and asks his aunt, uncle, and Linda to accept his token of revenge in the form of a totem made from bandit corpses before throwing a torch and setting it on fire like a savage. The gangsta then walks off, determined to head off to Nordia Kingdom first. A few days later, Van finally arrives at the Nordia Kingdom. On the crowded guild street, our hero casually decks a guy straight in the face like it's a healthy part of his morning routine. The poor man drops to his knees and blurts out that Anna Dalton is the person he is looking for. Our boy tells him he should have said that from the start. Then maybe he could have avoided catching these hands in the first place. He thanks the guy for his kind info and walks away, stepping over the red carpet of his freshly made victims. Our boy thinks he has to figure out who this woman actually is, and he better hurry since he can't afford to waste even a single second. Yesterday alone was enough proof, since his powers had an unexpected outburst and had him screaming in pure pain. His magic power started driving him insane, even though nothing like that ever happened back inside the pocket dimension. It is explained that magic power is made of mysterious particles invisible to the eye and is across the entire universe. Humans can absorb these particles floating in the air into their body, and that is how they're able to activate their runecraft power. To put it simply, those who can store the magic power in their bodies become sorcerers. But if magic power circulates out of control in the body, the user can literally explode from the inside. That is why Van must seal his unstable powers immediately before things get ugly. Summoning every ounce of willpower he has, he releases the excess energy in one massive blast until his magic power finally begins to settle down. Gasping for air, he struggles to get up while admitting that he nearly died right then and there like a noob. Because most of his powers are now sealed, he can only draw on a limited amount of magic at best. However, if he keeps recklessly using what's left of his powers, things won't just end with his hair getting roasted, which is why finding the real cause behind this rampage is more important than ever. Lost in deep thought, Van accidentally bumps into someone, a massive dude nearly as beefy as Guts. Thinking the big guy is deaf, he tells him to get out of his way again. The buff giant warns him that Miss Anna is currently using the place, so he should back off for now. Van looks up at the towering guy and replies that he should have said that earlier, even though that was literally the first thing he said. Our boy then one-punches the dude out of nowhere and sends him crashing to the ground. He then apologizes and tells the guy to go get some proper sleep while he keeps walking on ahead. Inside the building, 3 men in white demand to know who Van even is and warn him to get out right now. Our hero instead demands details about the mercenary Kazarak, and in response, a voice calls out telling him he is going to die here. Van insists and says she better give him every detail regarding that creep, but she just laughs at his boldness. The woman then orders her underlings to rip out that boy's mouth and bring it to her as a trophy. The 3 men immediately start glowing out of nowhere before they transform into werewolves with way too many eyeballs than they need. The trio rush at our hero, but he doesn't look the slightest bit bothered and says he really didn't want to use violence to get his answers. He bolts toward one of the wolf hybrids and makes short work of him while complaining that people always have to make things hard every single time. Just then, he senses another one charging him and casually dodges the attack as it crashes into a wall behind him. Farming raw aura with his smooth moves, he gracefully backflips away to create distance while the 2 beasts just stand there in confusion. Then, he suddenly dashes forward and unleashes a devastating punch that tears straight through their bodies and even shatters the wall behind them. Our boy then relaxes a little and asks Anna if she plans on talking peacefully with him now. The lady admits it is amusing to see that he's actually a sorcerer, but she lets him know that Kazarak isn't here anymore. Van asks where the mercenary went, to which she replies that she won't hand over any info unless she gets paid first. He asks her to spit out how much she wants, which genuinely surprises her since he was literally fighting her thugs earlier. Our boy makes it clear that he isn't a petty murderer, he was practicing self-defense, and then he offers to pay for the information. Anna calmly says that the cost will be 10,000 gold, which he obviously thinks is ridiculous. He really didn't expect it to be that expensive, but Anna replies that she cannot just hand out the info for free. He turns around and tells her to wait patiently, which makes her curious about where exactly he plans on getting the money from. The broker then asks why he's so dangerously fixated on tracking down that mercenary. Out of pure luck, she guesses that the mercenary murdered his family, so Van warns her to mind her darn business before she finds her pretty little face in 2 pieces. The threat doesn't seem to register with Anna as she keeps smiling and teasing him, saying he sounds too scary. Van then heads toward Mercenary Street, where he completes his registration at the guild. The receptionist explains that while the work itself is quick, veterans always get to pick their missions first, so it will be a while before he actually gets one. He crosses his arms while thinking this is going to take longer than he expected, and wonders if there's a faster way to get the money. Back then, he really did consider threatening the broker for the info, but he realized she wasn't just some ordinary woman, and there was no reason to rack up unnecessary enemies. He recalls his aunt's words, telling him to work honestly, but just then, a woman interrupts his thoughts by asking the receptionist to find her a newbie mercenary. That immediately catches our hero's attention, and the receptionist points at him, saying Van had just registered himself. They exchange a few words before the girl pulls down her hood and begins explaining her request. She bluntly tells him to take responsibility for her for one night, which leaves both Van and the receptionist completely stunned. He turns to walk away while the receptionist tries to scold her, saying this isn't the place for that sort of thing. The girl quickly clears it up and says she's looking for an escort, but Van keeps walking like a top G while she desperately calls after him, begging him to at least hear her out. Just then, a huge buff guy approaches the girl and offers to take the job, asking what the pay is. The girl reveals it's 10,000 gold, which makes Van freeze in his tracks instantly. She explains that she can't hire a well-known mercenary like him, but the man keeps insisting that she should reconsider. The big bastard insists he's better than that kid and then grabs onto her, making the girl scream for him to let go. That ticks the guy off even more, and he snaps that she should be grateful his greasiness is even offering his help. But before things can go further, our boy appears right beside him and calmly tells him to take his hands off. The bald guy looks confused, and with a chilling look in his eyes, Van repeats himself, telling him to get his greasy fingers off his dear bank account's body before he makes him so ugly even his mother wouldn't love him. Meanwhile, somewhere in the woods, a village is ransacked by a bunch of thugs who tell their leader, Merkel, that the peasant houses didn't yield much loot, so they should harvest some organs to make some profit from the raid. Merkel explains that they are free to do as they please, but he asks them about their main task to kidnap the daughter of the Leon household. The thug confirms it, and Merkel tells him to pick 3 of his best men and keep them ready for the next day. He then points to a body in front of him and asks them to hang it before heading out, and the thug says he will have 3 people on standby immediately. But before he can finish, Merkel yells no and suddenly lifts him using magic, causing him to ask what he did wrong. Merkel explains to the guy he did nothing wrong, he just isn't satisfied with hanging one body only. Then, the savage explains that he would like to dissect him in the same way as the body and hang him next to it to make the perfect set. Back at the tavern, our hero helps himself to some meat, but his employer sits in awkward silence before banging her fist on the table. Our boy asks if the food is not to her liking, and she screams that it's barely good enough to call food. Visibly uncomfortable, she also tells him to stop the mercenary from earlier as a human chair, but he asks if she's saying that just because she wants to sit in him instead. She yells no in disgust, so he sighs in disappointment before letting the mercenary go. But just before doing so, he kicks him some more and yells at the waste of oxygen not to get any of his filthy paws on his precious client, while she stands beside him yelling for him to stop before the guy dies. She apologizes to him, but at the same time feels glad that her mercenary is a skilled newbie, which perfectly matches the job description. Our hero calls it a shame since the human chair was comfortable before again talking about business. He inquires how far she is planning to travel since she hired him as an escort, and she explains that she just needs him to take her to the border of the Uhuana kingdom, and that they would need to pass through the forest in order to do so. Our hero questions why someone would hire an escort for 10,000 coins, and comments that he smells something fishy about the whole situation. He mentions that he feels like the girl is either a fugitive or an heir of an extremely powerful family. Leon explains that she's just the daughter of a very wealthy man who just spoils her with his money. My guy doesn't buy the fishy story, and Leon sighs that can always hire another mercenary if he thinks she is too suspicious. But Van sarcastically diffuses the situation by saying that he could never act rude to one of his clients, which pisses her off. He asks when she wants to head out, and she explains the sooner the better, so our hero suggests that they should start moving immediately, saying that he doesn't want to waste his client's time, and she agrees. The next day, they embark on their journey through the mountains, and Leon feels like they're already halfway there and wonders if she even needed to hire a mercenary in the first place, since the journey has been peaceful so far. But just then, Van signals for her to stop and stay silent when she asks what the problem is. He senses the mana of another magical being and carefully listens to the footsteps of the bandits. He is able to tell that there are at least 4 of them, and one of them is especially dangerous. Just then, Merkel appears and screams that peeking is a bad habit while shooting an energy beam at our hero. He quickly manages to dodge the attack while Merkel identifies Leon and tells his thugs to capture her alive. Leon looks at the destruction in shock while our boy guesses that it was just a warning attack, and something dangerous is about to come. Right then, he senses the thugs to his right just as he turns. The fight erupts with him blocking their strikes with his fists. Suddenly, one of them appears behind him to get a hold of Leon, but the protagonist simply parries their daggers and rear kicks the thug behind, delivering a fatal blow, after which he catches the princess and jumps back. As his injuries heal, he asks her to remain behind him at all costs, and she quietly complies. He asks the thugs who they are and wonders if they are just bandit NPCs, but they tell him to leave the girl and walk away if he wants to live. Hearing that, our boy tells them he can only leave if they pay him 10,000 gold coins. The fight kicks off again. He meets their strikes with his punches and just manages to keep them at bay. Seeing that, the thugs believe that the guy is just some hotshot and not a runecaster as they thought at the start, but he reveals that he was just playing nice and explains that it isn't necessary anymore. After politely calling them stupid, he sneaks right underneath them and starts a barrage of attacks, following it up with another powerful punch and an energy blast. By the time the dust settles, only 2 pairs of shoes remain where the thugs had been. He calls them a bunch of clowns while Leon wonders how someone younger than herself could be so capable and imagines that if her father were there to witness it, he would have been thrilled with amazement. Just then, Merkel speaks from the shadows that runecasters often sense manan of each other, and the amount of manan tells how strong a caster really is. Our boy playfully replies that he thought the creature replied after so long he thought it ran away, but Merkel questions how a mere child could have mana rivaling his own. He states that even if Van was born with it, he will dissect him first because someone like him must have excellent organs. It is revealed that Merkel is the mad anatomist whose gang is responsible for trafficking people, harvesting organs, and pretty much every evil thing in existence. The monster asks our boy to hand over the girl, and in exchange, he will dissect him painlessly like a gentleman. But my guy declines his generous offer. Hearing that, Merkel gets pissed off and shoots another energy beam, but Van just stands there and asks Leon if she lied about being a wealthy merchant's daughter. Before she could come up with an answer though, he grabs her from behind and shoves her in front of the beam as a human shield, which even makes Merkel wonder what the hell is going on in his mind. Leon stands there, trying to make sense of what just happened, while the two of them shout in unison, asking Van if he's got a screw loose or something. Merkel demands to know if he's actually her bodyguard, which even leaves the girl confused. Meanwhile, Van zones out for a moment, realizing the guy redirected the blast in an instant, so he has to be a skilled sorcerer. Van quickly figures out the monster's goal is to capture the girl alive, which he finds ridiculous because there's no way he's letting that happen. He tells Leon that he'll overlook her little lie this time, while she lashes out at him for nearly unaliving her back then. He casually puts a hand on her shoulder and says that he's about to throw her like a baseball, which makes her freak out. He reassures her to relax, then grabs her cloak and runs full speed to build momentum. In the next moment, he launches her into the sky like a pro pitcher, while the monster demands to know where he thinks he's running off to. Merkel rushes forward at full speed, but Van's already 2 steps ahead. He dodges the attack, latches onto the monster's foot, and charges his other fist. He smacks the monster square across the face while dodging attacks and finishes with an explosive punch straight to the gut. The monster leader stumbles back a few steps and starts laughing, and Van senses something is off as even though his attacks landed, something blocked them completely. Merkel flexes his muscles and says he'll destroy Van first, then deal with the girl later. The monster raises a hand which starts to glow and warns Van to brace for a beatdown. The psychic rune lets him suddenly release all his stored power in a devastating blast, which he proceeds to do, but Van dodges at the last second. The monster lunges forward and forces Van onto the defensive, who immediately notes how the rune greatly boosts hand-to-hand combat. Van tenses his entire body and rushes in while dodging every incoming strike. Merkel releases another blast, which Van narrowly avoids, before countering with a powerful punch straight to the monster's body. However, the monster shields himself using the psychic energy, which forces Van to retreat slightly. Van gets irritated by the second while Merkel taunts him, saying that even though they have the same amount of mana, it's useless because their skills have a massive gap. The monster then states that our hero could earn several times the amount the girl is paying her, which he reveals to be 10,000 gold. This makes the monster laugh out loud, who then says that our hero is getting pocket change for his skills, since he can make this much by just raiding 2 villages. That seems to hit a nerve with Van, who asks about the villages, and Merkel then proudly enlists all the evil things he does, which basically pays top dollar. He asks if he finds the offer good, to which Van begins to laugh out of nowhere. The monster then celebrates, claiming that his judgment of character is never wrong, but our boy then corrects him that he is laughing at how pathetic he is for talking to a monster. Van then takes a fighting stance while saying that even thinking about it is making him extremely ticked off, and that he has made up his mind to tear the monster piece by piece. Merkel then calls him dumb for throwing the opportunity away, but Van has had enough as he rushes in and delivers a flurry of attacks. The monster calls him dumb for even attempting to attack him, but boy doesn't care, and closes in again, delivering punch after punch to the barrier. Van doesn't let off, and after what seems like 1,000 hits, the shield shatters completely, catching the monster off guard. Before Merkel can even process how he did that, our hero attacks his arm and blows it off, which causes him to scream in pain. Van isn't done yet, as he proceeds to absolutely mop the floor with the monster and drives him into a tree. Merkel immediately gets extremely ticked off and declares that he isn't interested in Van's organs anymore. He blames our hero for all of this, and begins charging up a powerful attack, Strike of Blood. The peaceful forest suddenly erupts in light as the devastating blast turns everything in its path to dust. Merkel instantly notices something's off and shouts that he was sure their power levels were similar. Meanwhile, Van stands there with his aura maxed out as he takes the attack effortlessly, and asks if the monster really said their mana levels are the same. He calls Merkel a complete dunce, who is frozen in shock by the sheer presence of our hero, and wonders where the hell this extreme mana even came from. Before Merkel can make his next move, Van tells him that enough is enough. He closes the distance in an instant, ordering the monster to finally die as he activates his own special move, Destruction Fist. Merkel is helpless against the rapid attacks and Van tears straight through him, ripping a massive hole in the monster's body. Sometime later, our hero cleans himself up, rebandages his arms, and calmly walks away from the wreckage. As he walks away, Merkel's body lights up in a massive explosion, and Van quietly says to himself that maybe it's time to finally go find his client. Coming back to the lore, Rune abilities can arm your entire body with blades, smash through the land and cut down mountains, or can even cross the barrier of time and space. These mysterious powers are unnatural forces that do not follow the laws of physics. Among all these rune powers, the one called Asura is undoubtedly the most dangerous rune that can bring absolute destruction, and with this power, Van is currently writing a new course of history on the continent of Atun. The scene shifts back to Van, who sees Leon resting against a tree and says that he already knew she would be fine. The girl starts giving him an earful for blowing everything up, but our hero silences her by punching the tree behind her and saying that he knows well that she is hiding dirty secrets. Then, he calms down again and says that he does not care about those details, and instead asks her to hand over the money for the request. She quickly gives him the large pouch of coins, and he turns to take his leave. Right then, she calls out to him, and Van turns his head in slight confusion, but she decides to stay quiet and says that it is nothing. Leon desperately wants to take him to her family, but she does not want to drag a young mercenary like him into a brutal war. She regrets not being able to do so, yet she has no other choice left for her and finally decides to return home to her family. Later, our hero returns to Anna's place where he tosses her the bag of gold, and she comments with amusement that she was pretty confident he would succeed. Van then tells her to hurry with the info, and she replies that she will only take half the promised gold. That seriously confuses him, so she explains that she was unable to track down Kesserak as the guy is extremely difficult to locate. However, she promises to tell him all the details about him and the location of those who might know where he went. Hearing that, he tells her to spill it already, so Anna asks him if he knows about the mercenary guild by the name of Tees. You see, Tez is a mercenary guild that is active in various major crimes such as assassinations and espionage. The leader of the group is none other than Kesserak, and in the last 5 years, Teezy's influence has grown, and now it is so great that it can take care of a small kingdom with ease. That is the reason it has become incredibly difficult to locate the mercenary, as well as the main base of Tez. She then shouts that even if that is so, she isn't one to give up quickly, so she managed to locate one of the top officials of the guild. She holds up a poster and says that this is him. The guy is a ruthless assassin who uses the power of the concealment rune and has never failed a request in his life. Hearing that, Van puts it together that if he is part of the guild, then he must know where Kesserak is. Our boy asks where the person is now, to which Anna shares that her sources say he is most likely in Valhilda City, the capital of the Bogra Kingdom. Meanwhile, at the Merkel gang's base, a new threat has already presented itself. Heaps of bodies lie across the floor and the scene looks like a bloody massacre. A lone figure appears and impales all of Merkel's lackeys with a blade strapped to his arm. Although the thugs try to escape, not a single one of them is able to get away. One of the survivors shouts at the perpetrator to explain himself, but he simply replies that he is following orders, and the punishment is being delivered because they failed the mission given to them by Sir Kesserak. The thug yells back that it is only because they were never told the girl was being guarded by a monster of a mercenary, and blames him for the death of their chief Merkel. The assassin coldly apologizes for the loss, but he adds that even they had no idea Merkel would fall to some random mercenary. Hearing that, the thug demands to know if they are being wiped out over one dumb mistake, and argues that this goes too far. But the assassin explains that it should simply be considered punishment for a low-level warrior. The thug does not take this lightly and commands his crew to charge all at once. As it happens, the thug happens to own the touch rune, which allows him to create a massive hand of mana and clamp down on the assassin. As the thugs swarm in from every direction, the assassin quietly apologizes in advance, and before anyone can land a single blow, he vanishes. Then, before they even realize what has happened, he materializes behind the man and brutally slices him in two without warning. After the carnage is over, another man approaches to ask the assassin if the job is now finished, so he sarcastically asks him if he cannot even see the blood-soaked ground, and tells him to check for himself if he does not trust him. The man takes his word for it, and the assassin orders him to get lost. But the thug insists that an investigation has already started on the man who killed Merkel. He continues that the killer has black scars across his face, around his eyes, and down his neck. Hearing that, the assassin realizes that this means he is expected to take down the hero as well, and asks if there is anything else he should know. The thug compliments his big brain energy and tries to suck up to him, but the assassin does not sway. After that, the thug leaves after promising that he will report his work to Kesserak immediately. The assassin then pulls out a beat-up smoke and stands silently in the moonlight, wondering about the mercenary with the scars across his eyes and neck. Now cutting back to our boy, who is the man in question with scar on his face. The guy tells Anna that the Bagra kingdom is not too far away, and finally asks her about his target's name. And as the assassin exhales with a sigh that he has his work already cut out for him, his name is revealed to be Haksa. Well, seems like both bad boys just so happen to be looking for each other.